Welcome back to the channel. Resolve V20 is out. I want to show you a couple of cool plugins on the color page that have been updated, where we can go from something like this and change this predator blood. So what I'm going to show you on this first one is the Chroma Warp. This is where the color warper used to be, and you can still get there. There's a second icon here to use this, and this is now just called hue saturation, which sort of acts like the qualifier does over here when you're trying to use the HSL qualifier to isolate. So let's jump back over to here. I'll go ahead and reset this, and I want to show you a couple things. Let's pop out this tool and we'll go over the layout here. We have this new color graph here, which is pretty much just showing our chrominance. And in our tools, we have the normal mode. We have a point-to-point mode. We have a pinpoint, a selector, and a way to delete either of those. And then there's some options down below. Now this works, you can either grab right here within the graph or on screen. So once you've selected this tool and you're on one of the modes here, we'll stick with normal for now. We could either grab down here or grab on screen. You can see we get the eyedropper. I'm going to grab part of this green, and that's going to make a blue dot right where we have chosen. And then I can drag just like we did the color warper, and you can see the arrow starts moving towards our destination color. So I'll probably go right about there. Now let's take a look at this tool now that we've made an adjustment. We have this ring out here, which is our single stroke. So anything within this range, you could see the colors getting morphed right here on the image. Whereas if we change the chroma range, that will shrink down and it starts to go back to the original colors. So we could see that here on the screen and how wide this is. So we have a few tools. We can either go wider to get more of a pixel range. We have this exposure, which is almost like a saturation knob. And then we have tonal range, high, low, and pivot, which are kind of like when you use your qualifiers and you're trying to get your softness and your width of your range. So they're similar to that. We can move it around and you can see it'll start to exclude some of those colors. Now that is your normal mode. You can also change within your selection to a point-to-point if we click down here at the bottom. So even though we've already made this selection here, we can click point-to-point, and now you can see we have a circle. How this works is anything outside the circle isn't being affected, and anything inside this will be affected. So if you were looking for maybe to affect the reds, we could go over to the reds here, and you can see the fire starting to change in the background. Well, if we want this green hue, it does a really nice job of isolating the colors more so instead of doing the whole screen. Here's where the range comes in, if it's going to get wider or bigger. And then let's say there's a portion in here that needs to be safeguarded. We can select this pinpoint tool, add it, and that kind of makes a safe zone. And this also has a range. So if we move this over into here, you can see our scope actually changes as we're pulling this color back to its original value. And you could see that here on the predator blood as well. If there's some hue around here that we're looking to not affect on this one, we can add a safe pinpoint. And then you can right click to delete these as well. Now another cool feature is we can add more than one of these within the same instance. So let's say we wanted to change the fire over here. We could now click on the fire. I'm going to move back to point, and I'm going to grab here and maybe drag it over to the red a little bit more. Now you can see just the hue here is turning to our destination color. And then we have our chroma range here if we wanted to add some of the surrounding or lower it down to be a little bit more subtle of a hue. And same thing with the exposure. And you can see it's totally independent from the first one that we chose. So I want to show you one more trick in here before I move on to the next thing. With this secondary color here, you can see we've got a little bit of like overshadowing here. That can kind of get helped with this exposure and the range. And then if we need to move this over a little bit until it's actually picking up all the color we're looking for, and it does a pretty nice job. So if we go on and off here, you can see all these little spots where the blood isn't present. It's a little bit of a hard edge, but you could soften that up with the exposure a bit, lower that down here. So let's bring this down a little bit so you can see what the difference is. It's a little more convincing when it's less exposure. Now, here's the other thing I wanted to show you. I ended up experimenting with a window here, and I grabbed a gradient. And as you can see, let's turn it around and pay attention to the node right here. If we grab it and turn our opacity down, right now it's basically anything on the right side of this line is getting windowed. So you can see as we move over, it starts to bring the original back. You can see that line here. Adjusting the opacity, and look, we kind of get a mixture of both colors. So it's almost like a hybrid between the two. So I thought that was pretty cool of a feature, a way to morph it and blend it. All right, next thing I want to show you guys is the depth map. So let's reset this node here. I'm going to go over to the effects and type in depth, and we're going to drop that right on. And this one now is just called AI depth map. If you want to use the legacy version, you just hit faster, defaults to the older settings, and you can see how soft the image looks. So let's go back to better, which is the new version. In fact, I'm going to reset it and let it readjust on here. So I'm going to drop it back down. You can see what the depth map looks like. We're going to go ahead and adjust our map here. From this drop down, choose adjust map levels. And now what we're going to do is basically tell it what's close to us and what's far away. So we're going to have the main character here be in the foreground. There's some plants, but all this jungle scene behind him, we want to separate it because you can control the colors on each. So let's turn up the far limit. And now that's going to start darkening anything that's perceived as further back. Then we're going to adjust near limit. And that's going to start brightening up anything that it's going to perceive as close to us. So this is looking pretty good. And then we have a gamma adjustment to kind of split the balance between the two. And we're looking for a nice clean matte on our character in the foreground, as well as these plants that are close to camera. Now what we want to do is invert this, because as the saying goes, black conceals, white reveals. We're going to hit invert. So now we're only going to affect what's white inside this image. I'm going to turn off the depth map preview. And now if I go to my primaries and start making some adjustments here, I can lower down. As you can see, the foreground items, these plants and the character are left alone, and we can kind of make him pop out from the background a little more. Now here's the extra little tip. If we grab our depth map node, right click, we're going to say add node, and it's Option O on a Mac for an outside node. When we grab this, you can see it automatically feeds it a alpha channel or alpha input. So now if we hit highlight on this one, first node, you can see the gray area we're not affecting, and anything that's in color we are. If we click on node 2 now, you can see all that's grayed out in the background, and it's just showing us the foreground material. So I'm going to take highlight off with Shift H, and now we can make our hero pop out a bit more. So maybe give him a color boost, whatever you want to do. So now you can see he pops out a little bit more. And then if we go back to our first node, you can see what the background's doing. So that's a cool little way you can separate elements within your shot. Let's say you wanted to just make something more focused without using a magic mask or having to power window it. The depth map will work, and it works in real time through the shot. All right, third thing I wanted to show you guys was the new and improved magic mask. So I'm going to make a node here, and this will be our base node. And since this is kind of logish, I'll just go ahead and adjust the color a little bit so it looks a little bit more like what we're expecting. Now, Magic Mask, same thing, we have a legacy version. If we're on here, we use the option menu. There's Legacy Object Mask down here, and that brings us back to the old one, where if you were going to choose something, you would just make this stripe, and hopefully it would work. And if you wanted to exclude some things, you would go over to minus and add a minus picker, and it would start adding strokes. And then it had a little bit of intelligence here, whether you wanted to use a person or you're trying to tell it, hey, what am I trying to grab here? That's no longer the case. So I'm going to reset this back. We're going to get off the legacy mode. Now it just starts like this. And if we want to isolate this hat, I do a one click and it adds a single drop. I'm going to hit highlight, and you can see how clean that did. That's with zero other adjustments. You can stack these, so I'm going to add a parallel node with option P. That means these two nodes will be combined before it gets mixed into the video layer. So for node 2, we're going to isolate her jacket. So I'm going to go one click, Shift H, there's the highlight. As you can see, it's doing a nice job. There's a little bit behind this chair here, so we could probably get another click in here. And we still have all of our regular tools here, and this is on faster mode. So let's switch over to better. And there you can see it got the rest of that. And that's without making any other adjustments. And even on the first node here, with the color of his beanie, sort of matches the grout lines in the brick here, and even a little bit sort of in the same hue as her cuffs. It's not getting any of that. So it's very smart. And if we click on the overlay, we can see that's all that it's getting. And if we go to our second node here and do the same thing, you could see, because the parallel mixer is on, I could see his hat shifting a little bit, but let's try it on. There you go. Nothing but the coat. So now we could actually come here, maybe desaturate his beanie if it was distracting us, go to the second one, change the hue of her coat, and all that looks really convincing without doing a whole lot else. Pretty amazing. So that's the new magic. Way more intuitive, a single click, and there is a paint out tool if you need to. You can use that on one of the minus pickers and it gives you a little like brush type tool. Those are 3 of the features that I thought were pretty amazing. I just wanted to share that with you on this quick little update. Thanks for watching. I will make some other videos on some of the audio features because there is a ton, and I'll give those on upcoming videos.